Good afternoon. Good afternoon. How's lunch? Somebody save me some. Well, I'm delighted to be. Do you know how exciting it is for a speaker to be in a room where everybody wants to be here? No joke. I mean, I speak at conferences all the time, and many times people are there because it's a paid vacation. Now, I'm almost 50. I know I don't look it. Right? And it's really odd for me to be the oldest person in the room, too. So please, no one call me Mr. today, because I'll turn around looking for my dad. Now, I want to get a sense of who's in the room, first by age and then by sector. So who in here is under the age of 40? Raise your hand. Oh, my, I have bruises that old. Who's under 35? 30? 25. We'll tell you later who Johnny Carson is. Anybody under 20? So under 25, raise your hands again. Look around. We don't like these people at all. Now, I'm the youngest of four. I grew up in Kansas City, Missouri. Until I was 8 years old, I thought my name was Change the Channel. On the 3 channels. Now, we have people in this room that are from a cable generation. Can you imagine having to change the channel now on your TV manually? And there's still nothing good on TV. Okay, who in here is from the federal sector, federal government? Raise your hand. So who's getting work done today if you're all here? And I hope you didn't ask your boss to figure out how to transfer people on the phone system. Who in here is from state government? 1 person, 2, 3. How about county? Anybody from county government? A few? Great. And cities? A few cities. Okay, so we've got an interesting cross-section of people here today. First of all, I have to start off my presentation. If anybody's interested, nothing ever really exists until it's in PowerPoint. So if you're interested in these slides, please give me your, let's mingle, and I'll send you the PowerPoint slides for you to use as you wish. But first of all, let's get important things out of the way, and that is, who plays Angry Birds? Who's really good at Angry Birds? Who is obsessing about Angry Birds? Does anybody here not know what Angry Birds is? Raise your hand. You need to immediately go find out what it is. My son is 5½. He's addicted to Angry Birds. Every day I get an update on where he is in Angry Birds. Now, a few years ago, I was fortunate to serve on a panel to speak to employees of the Social Security Administration. Anybody in here from the Social Security Administration? Raise your hand. And there was this esteemed panel. Esteemed means you're older. And by the way, wasn't that a wonderful bio that Reese read? I wrote that. You do realize speakers write their own bio, so when they're standing off over here real sheepishly, it's an act. Anyway, so I was serving on this panel at a conference in San Jose, California a few years ago. There's probably about 150 Social Security employees. It was about career development. So there's all these seasoned veterans, boomers, right, on this panel talking about how to build your career. And guess what version of reality they were presenting? Theirs. They were presenting their reality. Now, who in this room is over the age of 40? Raise your hand. I won't ask if you're over 50, just out of respect, if there's anybody in here. The boomers, we grew up in a generation where we had to pay our dues and wait our turn, and it sucked. Because I'm at the tail end of the boomer generation, and people got these jobs, and they never left. Because some people quit and leave, some people quit and stay, and if they're in this room, don't look at them. So I was the last speaker on this panel, always fun to go last on a panel. And I said, and essentially is forget about everything everybody said today. Because they're telling you how to guide your career from where they sit. And I took the approach that my role today is to help you navigate your career from where you sit. Because you're encountering different challenges and different opportunities than what I did when I was ascending my career. And I spent 15 years working in cities all around the country before I started my own consulting firm and went to the dark side. So today what I want to do is try to describe, if I can be so bold to impose on you, to indulge your sense of wonder for the next 30 or 40 minutes. Now, one of the things I don't have to worry about with this audience is that you won't say, that won't work here. Has anybody ever heard that like this week at their workplace? If you hear yourself saying, we've done it all the time, we've always done it that way, you should immediately go to adult recess, which is happy hour. One of the things that scared me the most when I worked in government was what I called the lava effect. I was telling Andy Kazmark this morning about I was so worried that somehow I would be co-opted and start to defer to the status quo thinking that seemingly was rampant in organizations. I was 25 years old, working for the city of Phoenix, asking lots of why questions, you know, like the equivalent of a 5-year-old in the family. Why do we do this? Why do we do that? And what I was met with was passive and aggressive resistance. I went home one day and wrote in my journal, "We don't seem to think much at work." And I know that sounds silly, but it was really disturbing. We did so many things by rote, it was almost like a motor skill. Like when you drive to work and you're not sure how you got there, and it kind of worries you, you know, like, did I run over something? There was a bump. I hope that wasn't anything that was alive. And I'm a contrarian by nature, sort of that old Groucho Marx joke. I would never belong to a club that would have me as its member. I really fought that notion of being co-opted. And I often saw when I was 25 or 26 that I wanted to spend about 20 years in government and then get out and become a consultant, because I found my passion was to tinker and to mess with things. But today isn't about me, it's about you. And by the way, it's been mentioned earlier today about the box. I just wrote this article. It was published this month by Public Management, ICMA. I think it ran on GovLoop a few months ago as well. There is no box. Right? There is no box. And you know, that scares the heck out of people. Title of my article is, "There is no box. Uncertain times demand rapid innovation." But you know how much it scares people right now, senior managers, that they can't go to conventional wisdom and reach in their pocket and pull out what always worked to deal with problems? As much as they complained about that, it was also very comfortable, wasn't it? Now, I don't know about you. How many of you like to work out at a health club? Now, according to my wife, we always need new outfits to go to the health club. How many of you are like that? Because somehow looking better makes you work out better. Men sweat, women glisten. How many of you have your dues taken out of your bank account once a month for your health club? Okay, and how many of you are really good at driving by the health club? Does anybody in here besides me struggle to go to the health club? We talk about it, we think about it, we talk about thinking about it, we think about talking about it, we think somehow by talking about it, somehow we're getting in better shape. Now, if round is a shape, I'm in shape. Some people have a six-pack, I have a 2-liter. But the whole notion about getting in shape, so you work out at the gym. How many of you can admit in front of everyone in here that on the way home from the gym, you stop and get a donut? Thank you. I saw some of you out there getting the salad and then loading up on all the salad fixings and then getting a diet soda. Does that happen to anybody in here? About bargaining, about trade-offs, about how we build things. It's fascinating how that works. Well, there is no box. So let me start off with a quote, like any good speaker starts off with a quote. Playing it safe is no longer playing it smart. One of the things that is troubling today is people say, "Let's not rock the boat." How many of you have heard that at your workplace? I don't want to rock the boat. My observation is, baby, the boat is rocking. This is a financial tsunami that we are living in. These times will not become certain in the foreseeable future. You tell me what's riskier. Sitting in the boat, waiting to see where it goes, or putting an oar in the water and finding some piece of land or a beacon? You tell me. It's very counter. What's the first thing a business does when it starts to see revenue decline? What's it cut back on? Advertising. Now they're just dying a slower death that no one will know about. What's an organization often do? What do you do in your career when the furloughs are coming and the budget cuts are coming? I'm going to hunker down. So it's not really easy, not really hard to lay people off when you don't know anything about them, isn't it? Think about it for a moment. Right now is when you should be bold, brash, and raise your awareness. Raise your level of productivity. Raise the notion of doing things different. Because this is not lost on this group in here. You are your brand. As much as we get tired of hearing about branding, you are it. And you know what is so wonderful about your generation? Is that you're a knowledge-free agent that chooses to lease your talents for as long as you're challenged. That scares the hell out of baby boomers, because they gave the keys to their career to an employer and expected them to put them in ignition. You own your keys, don't you? You're trying to figure out how to put it in the ignition and drive the car. Good for you. I think that's wonderful. But it is a little apprehensive, so let's figure out how to do that. Let's look at some trends. Digital government, we'll come back to that. The changing role of government. We are seeing transformational change at all levels of government. I traveled on Monday, this past week, I was in Boulder, Colorado. Last month, I was in South Carolina. I've traveled over 40,000 miles this year. I've been in about 15 states, speaking, doing consulting work, California to South Carolina, North Dakota to Texas. So I'm in a lot of different organizations in a lot of different places. And government systematically, fundamentally, is shifting. You will never see government employ as many people as it did up to the year 2008. Public pension reform, it's coming, isn't it? And it's not just at the state and local level. Two-tiered hiring systems. Arizona, where I live, the state of tolerance, the Arizona. Where I live, the state retirement system just adopted a two-tiered pension system. If you're hired after a certain date, you contribute more to your retirement and more to your benefits. Declining revenue. Is there any other kind? Does anybody in here have revenue increasing? Because if you do, you better get your mingle stick out because people are going to want to come work where you're working. Expectations. Help me understand this. When revenue declines for government, do citizens' expectations decline? No. They're always increasing, like ours. Lifestyle habits. Oh, we can't let people work from home. They'd be in their pajamas. How many of you are still fighting this notion of telecommuting in your agency? Because boomers think they have to see you every day. It's called FaceTime. Of course, they spend all their days in meeting. They have no idea what you're doing. Some people compensate for coming in late by leaving early. So lifestyle habits are changing. Baby boomerang effect. That's what I call, that's what I've termed the notion that when are these baby boomers going to leave my organization? Absolutely. Let's applaud at that. Absolutely. Last week I got contacted by Tina Treckner. Tina, you're in here from Governing. She's in the back. Governing, a wonderful publication. Shameless plug. Unpaid endorsement, by the way. Thank you. She contacted me. She knew about this conference. She knew what an incredible group of people that would be here. And she asked me to write a blog, so I wrote a blog about what I was going to talk about. And, you know, if you don't say things that don't move people, you're not really saying things that matter. So I read what someone posted on there, and she was really upset. She was a boomer and said, you didn't talk about us at all. That's right, I didn't talk about you at all. You're at a different stage in your career. Now what we're finding is boomers aren't leaving because of pensions. And they're sitting in those jobs. Sitting and waiting. Waiting and sitting. Remember, there are two types of employees in organizations. One, you have a party for them before they leave. That's called dramatic pause. And the second type you have, right? And the second type you have is the party you have for after they leave. Now, as you ascend in your career, some of you, how many of you are in supervisory and management positions right now? Raise your hand. And it's wonderful, isn't it? Managing people's performance because people always show up and do what they're supposed to, the way they're supposed to do it. And you never hear about people's personal problems. What's the reward for good work? More work. What's the reward for poor work? Promotions. No, less work. Now, that second type of employee, you all have been around people when they came in and gave notice to their manager. The manager had to show empathy and understanding, right? Said, oh, I'm really sorry to hear that you're leaving. We'll have to have a little something for you. But on your way, can you shut the door? And as soon as that person walked out, they got on the phone to call their spouse or partner and said, guess who quit? And if they're in this room, don't look at them. That's right. Okay. Personal branding, we're going to explore that notion. You are your brand. You know, government, this notion, they think by adopting a new logo, they have a new brand. Who works in an agency where because they have this new identity logo, they think that's a new branding campaign and they slapped it on the side of vehicles? I'll tell you in a short phrase what government's brand is. In theatrical terms, you are the protagonist for quality of life. That is your brand in government. I don't care at what level you work, you're about building community and the quality of life. You're the protagonist in that sense. If you're not, you're failing your mission. What's your personal brand? What are you about? Because everybody, I interviewed over 1,000 people in my career. It took me about 500 to realize that, you know, these two questions weren't exactly predictive. We'd be on this panel asking people questions and we'd say, are you a hard worker? Oh, hey, that's a good question. That's a good question. The candidate would say, yes. We'd ask him the next question. Oh, he said, yes, that's good. Then we'd ask him the second question. Do you like working with people? Oh, that's a good question. Good question. Yes. How ridiculous were those questions? What are they going to say? No, you hire me, I'll be your worst nightmare. I really don't like people. They're really in the way. The two biggest problems you have with employees, among others, is their approach to work and their inability to work with other people. You realize, and this goes without saying, but I'll say it anyway, we're all in the relationship building business. Because we know technical proficiency always translates to supervisory capability, and seniority always translates to competence. And you work with people who think they are owed that promotion. And what I love about young people is you want to work in a performance-based culture, not a seniority-based culture. Keep that going. Keep moving those ideas forward. Legacy management beliefs, I'll just dispel those right now. Adding more people always translates to improved productivity. Right, because people are laying awake at night saying, I can't wait to go to work tomorrow because I need more change in my life. I love to be micromanaged, and I can't wait to get a 2.45% pay increase so I can improve my productivity. They're being dispelled. And accelerated innovation. There's tremendous pressure right now for you to innovate. And by the way, stop the task forces around innovation because they don't work. Stop the employee suggestion box program because they don't work. You hear three things: fire my boss, bring in hot food, and give me a pay raise. By the way, who does R&D for government? Ponder that for a moment. I've done extensive research on innovation. I've visited Stanford. I've visited Google. I've tried to find out organizations and universities where innovation is their core approach to how they build capacity. And I've developed a whole approach to that. That's a topic for another day. But innovation, it's not a sometimes thing now. You better be doing it. If not, you better get on board. But let's talk about just quickly about the digital government trends, social media and civic engagement. Who in here is not on Twitter? Who in here is not on LinkedIn? Who in here does not have a Facebook page? How many of you, I'm interested to see, I had my 22-year-old niece with me last week. We went out to visit, my wife and son and I. By the way, I didn't mention my son, Maximiliano. He's 5.5 years old, probably in the history of the planet, the world's most beautiful and brilliant child. And if you're home watching, turn off Angry Birds. We were in San Diego last week. Does anybody know what was going on in San Diego last week? I took her to Comic-Con. I bought a ticket off a scalper and got her into Comic-Con. She's 22. Thrill of her life. If you've not been to Comic-Con, it's worth going just to hang out outside the convention center. I saw men my age get really excited about a collectible of Buck Rogers. I can't understand why he's struggling to date. But if you've not been to Comic-Con, go, because just being around this whole environment, it's a pop culture fest. Beyond the outfits, it's a wonderful way to peer into young people. So what I'm fascinated about young people is that texting and email aside, you're using Facebook to communicate in real time with people. I see it in airports. This whole technology craze is driving boomers crazy. They're still trying to figure out the dictionary for texting. Yes, and if you don't know the dictionary and you're over 40, ask your teenager. E, M, and T commerce. See, if government's not on the way, here's what I ask you to do. At break, bring your agency up on your smartphone and see how long it takes to load. And see if you can transact commerce. And the last thing you should do is ask your IT department to update your website. You notice they never get around to it? They're always got something going on. Your website, T-commerce, e-commerce, is a communication tool. It's a business tool, not an electronic brochure. Shared consolidated services, we are seeing unprecedented changes where cities, counties, and school districts are merging procurement, HR, finance, IT. These are trends. We don't have to like them, but they are what they are. Apps, how many of you are familiar with See, Click, Fix? And if you're not, go visit it. Another unpaid endorsement. And entrepreneurial. We love to say we're entrepreneurial in government, don't we? Sounds good. But it's a challenge. How are you an entrepreneurial in government? It is an expectation. But let me ask you the question as we move into your career. Are you a climber or are you a coaster? Are you a flame starter or are you a flame thrower? Because we have all types. Something to ask yourself. You know, in the film The Graduate, how many of you are familiar with the film The Graduate? I know some of you have never even seen a film in black and white, but The Graduate came out in the late 60s. Dustin Hoffman plays this coming-of-age, very turbulent time in this country at that time. Does anybody remember the one word that came out of that film that really caught on in pop culture lexicon that Dustin Hoffman was advised about his future? Plastics, Ben. Plastics. Some seen, one of his dad's friends told him the future of the country and business was plastics. Well, I'm going to update that version, if I may be so bold. The one word I think for you all going forward is synchronicity. No, not the Police album, but synchronicity. And what I mean is this whole approach of synchronicity, the overlap of these concentric circles about your career. Let me share some thoughts with you about leadership. Remember, leadership has little to do with titles and everything to do with behavior. When I was in city government, I saw really poor leadership demonstrated sometimes by elected officials and really incredible leadership determined by a foreman on a water main break at 3 o'clock in the morning trying to make a decision. Because it's about decision making. Let me ask you this. Who in your organization's responsibility is it to deliver high quality service? Everyone's? Here's a tip. The answer to all these questions is everyone. Whose responsibility is it in your organization to be a good problem solver? Whose responsibility is it to be a good decision maker? Whose responsibility is it to have a good sense of humor? His. Whose responsibility is it to be a good communicator? Whose responsibility is it to be a good leader? Everyone's? Communicating, sense of humor, decision making, problem solving, customer service, leadership. Those 6 attributes, could we at least have some level of agreement that those are 6 areas that you need to execute on a regular basis to be effective in your role? Now, do me a favor, when you go back to work, find your job description and see where it says those 6 attributes. Do you realize your job description doesn't even say that you have to do it well? Job descriptions are shields for poor performers, and they are weapons for unions. And I say this having been at the table bargaining with Teamsters and Fraternal Order Police. How many of you work with people who routinely say, this is not my job description? And it's infuriating. Those people are coasters. It has nothing to do with age and nothing to do with gender. You tell me, do you need more leaders or followers in your organization? You know, hiring people is a little like dating. How many of you are still in the dating phase? By the way, if you're married, you still have to date your spouse or partner, right? You have to keep things interesting. You have to bring people into the organization. You have to keep things fresh with people. But what about dating is you often get what you look for, don't you? And in hiring, it's the same thing. If we just want people to pass tests, that's what we get. You don't have to be married very long before you realize you can't change people. Right? Right? Somebody in the back of the room, no! He's been married 4 times, but it's never him. Absolutely! So let's talk about each one of these: leadership, trajectory, outcomes, and innovation. Hopefully these are some new ideas presented in a different way, because my goal today is to help you think differently about your role, your career, and where it's going. Because you're only limited by your imagination. You know, Mark Twain said, luck is the residue of perseverance. People will say to me before I come up, and other speakers, to say, are you nervous? Look, it's a packed house. And I say, look, I've worked my whole career to be in front of you today. Pressure is a privilege. You place yourself in that position in the organization to make decisions because that's what you've prepared yourself to do. Right? Some people wait for divine intervention. That's called a conclusion. If we wait long enough, somehow this problem will solve itself. Therein lies the decision. But let's talk about your role. Let's talk about your career brand. Now, thankfully, the NFL settled its strike. Who in here is happy? Who in here is in a fantasy league? Wow. Who lives in a fantasy league? Let's talk about I'm coming up with I'm developing a new idea. In my consulting practice, it's going to be called your leadership playbook. I'm going to be doing webinars on this starting this fall, right in time for football season. But think about your leadership capital that you accrue and that you leverage. Here's the challenge with accruing capital. You can't just put it under your bed and keep it for safekeeping. You want to be effective as a leader? You got to play a few hands. How many of you like watching card playing on television? The same people who like watching paint dry are those same people. Now, I love to watch golf on TV because it's the most exciting sport on TV, bar none, by the way. Yes, and just because of the pants. But your leadership playbook, think about what your game plan is. What's your approach? You don't have to laminate your game plan, but what's your approach to this? It's not about goals. I've rarely had goals in my life, but I had direction. I had focus. I had thoughts about where I was going and how I was growing. What's your offense? How are you executing your approach to building your career? Defense, what are the barriers to change? Who's getting in the way? What's getting in the way? X's and O's, sort of the operational execution. How are you actually, and the speakers earlier today talked about specifically actions you can take in the workplace to build alliances, to get things done. Play calling. Sometimes you have to call an audible, right? Which means sort of in the midst of things you have to shift focus. This is sort of like career Darwinism. You're adapting to changing circumstances. How many of you are a list maker? Raise your hand if you're a list maker. Boy, this is like a 12-step program for list makers. Raise your hand if you're a list maker. Those of you that are not, who's in here is an avowed non-list maker? I just have one phrase for you. Resistance is futile. Now, those list makers, how many of those list makers are married to or involved with a non-list maker? And what do you say to them when they forget something? I don't say anything. I woke up one morning, tattooed on my hand, a happy wife makes a happy life. I have no idea how it got there. How many of you have a list of lists? Come on. How many of you have a list for the weekend? How many of you plan to be spontaneous? How many of you tell your spouse or partner, honey, on Saturday at 10 o'clock, let's be spontaneous? And then at 9:59 you said, I wrote some things down that we could do at 10 o'clock. I see a lot of chuckling in here, so I'm assuming this I'm the same way, so, I can relate to that. But this whole notion of adapt, it's about control. Control is an illusion, but there are times that you have to adapt. Now, I get where you are in your career. There are people that you work with that have forgotten more about the playbook than you even know. But guess what? They don't know what you don't know. Ponder that. They don't know what you don't know. So work from a position of strength in that game play calling. Touchdown, one success. What are the success factors in your career? And they're different for everybody in the room. What are those success factors? The fans, your support network, how are they cheering you on? Maybe you've got people that are, showing up to your workplace, painting their face, supporting you. Who are your champions? Family, friends, coworkers, your boss. The field, what's the terrain look like? See, what's really disrupted government in the last few years is it's so uncertain. Does anybody in here work with people who say, boy, things were better in the good old days? Don't you get tired of that? I used to get tired. I'm still tired of that. They weren't better in the good old days. When people start waxing nostalgic is when you've turned into an adult. And by the way, just let me tell you people in here, when you turned into an adult, when you start talking about the following things at work. 1, the weather. You start talking about the weather at work, you're turning into an adult. I'm sorry to tell you. Second thing, the commute. If you start talking about the commute at work, you're turning into adult. And last but not least, if you ask somebody to turn down their music, you're now officially an adult. So if you fit those 3 characteristics, do what you can every day to dip yourself in chocolate and stop being an adult. And ownership. What's the organizational management? So your leadership playbook, the leadership capital, what are you doing to build that and leverage that? Don't wait till you're ready to be a leader. You're ready right now. If you don't see yourself as a leader, no one else will. It's as simple as that. Forget your age, forget your tenure, forget how long you've been in the organization, forget what people tell you. If you do not see yourself as a leader, no one else will. It has a lot to do with self-esteem and self-efficacy. Whether you're at home or you're at work, it's about decision making. So I encourage you all to reflect on that. Even when you have doubt about your leadership capability, make a decision, move forward. So that's your one step into your career brand. The second one, your trajectory. Think about your own career trajectory. I hope it's still ascending. Mine is. I've been 25 years in the business with or around government. I'm 50. I'm going to be 50. I've got a 5-year-old son. He likes to eat. My wife, I travel all over the place. I get home, my wife says, let's go somewhere. This is my livelihood. You ever meet consultants who are doing this on the side? That's what you get, on the side consulting. I'm out in this world every day, living in this world, not like you, but trying to develop solutions to help you improve your performance, and as Mejorando indicates, get better all the time. But who and what are you reading? Now, Governing is a wonderful publication, GovLoop. There's a lot of great government publications. If you're interested in reading some things outside of government, give me your business card or let's Do our sticks there? Mingle, and I'll send you a list. And they have nothing to do with government. By the way, when you're at your next favorite bookstore, Borders, by the way, is having a big sale. When you go there, find a book on public sector management, keep the receipt, mail it to me, and I'll send you a check. I'll reimburse you because no one is writing for you. Let's be good to great. Well, somebody said that in an agency once because they read the book jacket. It's called Management by Bestseller. You realize bestsellers are the ingredients. You've got to figure out how to assemble the ingredients. You cannot change an organization by reading a book. Now, you all know when your manager goes to a conference and you're thinking, oh, boy, here she or he goes again. Well, number one, I get a lot more work done while he or she is gone. They haven't figured out how to text me yet, but they're going to bring back a book from the conference, and we'll have to get all excited about it and put it on the shelf next to the book they brought last year that we didn't do anything about because after 3 weeks, she forgot all about it. Does that happen to anybody in here? Raise your hand. Skepticism. Now, until I write my book, you should be very skeptical. Then when I write it, you should buy copies for your friends, your family, your coworkers. But who and what are you reading? Who in here is reading Fast Company? Wired. Wired's a great magazine. It will stretch your imagination in ways you're like, really? Business Week, Inc. You might think, what do these have to do with government? Nothing. They have to do with you. They have to do with trends. They have to do with opportunities. So who and what are you reading? Networking, I know that was frowned upon earlier by a speaker who thought he was old because he was about 30, which I hit him in the face when he came off. I said, where did you work, Nick? Never mind. And job assignments. Think about where your job assignments are. Fred talked about earlier about, and I think Nick did too, look for new opportunities. Don't wait. Don't wait for permission. Go look for those new job assignments. Look for that job shadowing. When I used to love to hire young people in cities I worked in and then send you out to departments to drive them crazy. And I used to take you to meetings with me. I always had tons of meetings to go to, community groups, regional organizations, city groups, all kinds. I had all these meetings. So I used to tell people like you to say, now you're going to go with me to these meetings for 6 months. Don't say anything because I realize you just came out of grad school and you have all the answers, but don't vomit on anybody here and marginalize your influence. Listen for 6 months because in 6 months you're going, I'm not. Because I got other things to do. And on the way back from the meeting, on the way to the meeting, I would say, I want you to pay attention to a few things. Because, see, I saw myself as a teacher in an unconventional way. I'm a facilitator of growth. If I want other people to do well, I got to help groom those people. And if somebody's not grooming you, look for people that will groom you. And on the way back from the meeting, I would say, what did you learn? Tell me what we should do differently. Right? Asking open-ended questions. Mentoring, how many of you have a mentor? Great. How many of you struggle to find a mentor? Yeah, something we should talk about. I should talk to Steve and Dave about doing what's called a community of practice. Let's do some group mentoring. I'll be glad to be a resource there. That's essentially what's going on in real time anyway on GovLoop right now, right? Through blogs. Training. Training is one tool to guide your skills, but it only really gets at skills and knowledge. And it's great that the first thing on the chopping block when government budgets get tight is training, isn't it? How many of you fought those battles to try to convince decision makers to keep training? How many of you are here today on your own nickel? That's becoming increasingly common in conferences around the country. So your trajectory, you want to keep it going? You got to invest in it. You got to invest in it outside of work. No one owns your career except you. We talk about a sense of ownership. You got it, baby. It's yours. And your generation, people under 35, under 40, you get that better than anybody. I think that's wonderful. Well, let's talk about outcomes. What are you focused on? Because we talked about those job descriptions. They're full of tasks. Are you focused about, I worked hard today? What'd you get done? Are you about results? And how are you looking at results? Because when you go into an interview, this is what I would ask you. What did you do in the last year to make a difference in your organization? You should always be thinking about what questions you're going to be asked by organizations that you want to work in. And building your career right now to get ready for that interview. So right now, sometime today, sometime this weekend, sit down and imagine yourself in an interview in an organization where you want to either grow or move on to that's going to challenge you. They're not going to ask you the padded questions. Tell me about your resume. Tell me about yourself. And if anybody does a Myers-Briggs on you, leave immediately. Myers-Briggs is the equivalent of your zodiac. You all are educated people. Myers-Briggs has no predictive value whatsoever. It is an inventory of tendencies. Somebody in HR fell in love with Myers-Briggs, so that everybody has to go through Myers-Briggs or DISC or colors, and they think somehow that's a predictor. It is not. It is not a psychometric evaluation tool, right? We all get that. We're educated. But what are your 4 indicators? Anyway, systems thinking, that was brought up earlier. Again, how are you approaching this? Many of you have advanced degrees. Systems thinking is about how are you looking at things, the interdependence between your capabilities, the interdependence in your organization. How are you looking at that? Execution, it's about operationalizing new opportunities, not just talking about it. Impact and influence. See, I don't think today people are looking for jobs. People are looking for meaning. You want to have an impact, and government is in the impact business. I don't care where you sit. You have an impact. We'll talk in a moment about that. And change. People, again, love change. Do people in your organization have long memories? Please, of course they have long memories. They can tell you why something happened 7 years ago, and that gives them a license not to do something today, right? They don't say, I'm a resistance to change. They say this, we've always done it that way. We tried that once, it didn't work here. We don't have enough people. We don't have enough money. I think people need an expiration date on their opinions. Like bad milk. Don't you wish you went into work someday and somebody said, we've always done it that way, and you said, I'm sorry, as of July 28th, 2011, you can no longer have that opinion. Make the world a lot better place. One of the best pieces of nuggets I hope to offer you today is where you are in your career, especially those people under 30, maybe even under 35, your chance to have access to key decision makers is going to be limited. The best way for you to gain access to decision makers are your writing skills. I know that sounds like, really? And I don't mean your texting skills. I mean your writing skills. And more is not always better. I teach at Arizona State University. I'm teaching an online class right now. I have 28 graduate students on the class of organizational change. Writing skills are not where they could be. Let me just say that. So when you get a chance to write a report or you pursue an opportunity, you make sure you do your very best at putting together the strongest argument of thinking analytically about how you're going to... Because what do we think about people who write well? Right. And all of a sudden, people who write well get access. And it may frustrate you that you'd like to get access just because you're you and you're really smart and you have all the solutions. But I hate to tell you, there's blockers up there, right? So I just encourage you to think about your writing skills and how to improve on that. And if you ever do a report and you want to see how well it's going to be received, send it to me. I'll give you some feedback for whatever that's worth. And the last piece, your career brand, is innovation. How many of you like to say that you're a change agent? Yeah. How many of you are an innovator? Now, I would just ask you to think in your mind about what you're actually doing to be an innovator. See, innovation is both an input and an outcome. I wake up every morning hungry because being in business is like running a marathon comprised of many sprints. I work really diligently to not only approach innovation, but to think it through systematically, fundamentally, organizationally, creatively. You got to work at it. It's like working out. Well, I say I go to the gym. I talked about going to the gym, but I don't really actually go to the gym. You want to be an innovator? Here are some things to do. Again, read non-government publications. Participate on a blog. How many of you participate on a blog? There you go. Explore the arts. When I was in government, I used to take my staff on field trips. They had to bring a note in from their spouse. We'd walk out of the building holding hands. Field trips are important in organizations. I would take them to the arts, to a film. There was always a theme, and I would take them to lunch. And I'm a big believer that in order to challenge people's assumptions, you have to take them away from the workplace and bring them back through a new portal. So go to the arts, challenge your assumptions. It's good for you. Write things down. We've gotten away from writing things down. What happens when we have to write something down? It crystallizes our thinking. It's powerful and cathartic and beneficial. Advocate for slack. No, not slackers, but discretion, because what you want is bandwidth in decision-making. Push for that. Wander around. Take tours of other places. Wander around this facility. Be curious. It's a great trait. You can learn from many different sources if you're ready for it, if you're available for it. Bring in guest speakers into your organization that have nothing to do with government, but they do really cool things. People are going to say, well, this has nothing to do with work. Well, yeah, you don't have to go. We're here about challenging and disrupting the status quo, about thinking creatively. That's not a one-way ticket. Stretch the imagination, traffic and ideas. One thing Fred didn't tell you what he was actually doing with those Post-it notes. Fred's not here, right? Fellow from IDEO. What he's actually doing with out there where did anybody post their Post-it note? It's called an idea wall. So let me tell you how you can do it in your organization. Again, get rid of the suggestion box. How many of you have a break room where people go and congregate? The Michael Scotts of the office. They go back and congregate. I suggest that you do this. Put a question on the whiteboard and says, what more can we do about being innovative? And sit back and wait and see what happens. Now, HR, and I was in HR, I'm a reformed HR director. I was 6'8" when I was an HR director. Okay, what they'll tell you, they'll want to spend a year trying to adopt a policy if somebody writes something inappropriate on the idea wall. Here's what you do. Now, watch carefully. Watch carefully about what you do if somebody writes something up there that's inappropriate. Turn around and erase it. There it is. You're done. That's what happens. You don't have to spend a year in a cross-functional task force trying to figure out how to discipline people. Erase it. But traffic and ideas, that idea wall. Now, I'm going to wrap up here with social marketing. I'm going to give you an assignment. On the left is an advertisement, a one-page ad from Verizon out of Business Week. On the right is what the typical government ad looks like. This guy's an engineer. Anybody ever sell their house? What's the first thing a realtor tells you that your house better have? Curb appeal. Your job description should not be the job announcement. Ladies and gentlemen, the job description should not be the job announcement. They are boring. On the left, why did Verizon do this? Well, we could talk about all the reasons about social marketing. What's your personal career marketing? Oh, I have my LinkedIn page, Patrick. I'm on Facebook, yeah. Synchronicity, ladies and gentlemen. At some point, we're going to be overloaded with access to who you are. I suggest that you do the following. Take a photo of yourself. Now, if you were like me and took the photo out here with the mingle stick, that's not a photo that you want. I know, somebody told me once I had a great face for radio. Upload or download that photo to your favorite iPad, tablet, computer, some sort of technology. Read this article in ink, 30 under 30, and get pleasantly surprised and get a little torqued off. These people under 30, man, they're changing the world. Why can't I? Here's your chance. Read this article from Fortune called Pulling Off the Ultimate Career Makeover. And then sit down. Contemplate till your head hurts. Thinkers and drinkers. Anybody ever been to a thinkers and drinkers event? It's called happy hours for the intellects. Sponsor one. It's called, like an adult lubricant. Moisten your mind. Go and talk with people. Then come back. Change your photo, preferably not after you've been to the thinking and drinking event, because that might show up other places. And then sit down and create either your personal postage stamp or your own app and send it to me. And think of this previous social marketing page. If we were to describe you, this is not your resume. This is a picture of you doing something incredibly fascinating, like filing. Do not take a picture in your cube. You want people to be attracted to you? Then you better use your own personal brand to articulate that, whatever that is, however fascinating you are. And you're all incredibly talented, driven, ambitious, and focused. I envy that. I wanted to hire people like you. I look for people like you. But government they don't hire the best and the brightest. They hire who's left, because that's who they go after. Government's not at career fairs. They're not out recruiting. The military does it because it works. I say this to my clients. My clients are city, counties, and states. Oh, we hire the best. No, you don't. You're not on college campuses. You're not at places where people are. So you put yourself in the position to be attracted. Always put yourself in the position to say no to jobs. That's the hardest part for you. I know where you are in your career. Well, I know, but if I say no, nothing worse than being in a bad relationship or being in a bad job because of a bad fit. I'll give you one final thing and then I'll wrap up. You can tell a lot about an organization's culture about the hiring process. The timeliness, what's involved. If you think somehow that because they move slow, they're not going to move slow when you get in, think again. If they move fast, swift, they're sound, that's probably how the organization functions. So we're going to open up to questions, but as a consultant, I didn't even use the word that I'm really violating my oath of synergy. So I have to say that, it's out there. But I'm just going to do some shameless marketing. I'm really a solutions provider. I'm based outside of Arizona again. I partner with government leaders and implement solutions to improve performance. I've done some work for federal, state, all sorts of levels of government. My services, organizational improvement, leadership development. I'd really be delighted to talk to you about your organization, where I might be a speaker, where I can be a consultant working with you and your workforce about leadership training or facilitating team meetings or actually doing performance improvement. I'm going to be around the balance of today, and I'll be around through lunch tomorrow. I'd really like to talk to you about opportunities. But I want to, again, challenge you before we turn it over to questions about this notion of sending me your postage stamp or your personal app. Send it to me. I'll give you feedback. Because I think that's where we're going with all this digital government and social marketing. Right now, it's all driven by organizations and individuals. But how are you going to leverage that for your career? Because at some point, people are going to get tired of looking at your LinkedIn profile. Anybody checked out Google Plus yet? Right? That's foreshadowing. So we're going to turn it over to questions. Candace has her running shoes on. Questions. I'll be glad to answer questions in the next few minutes. Fascinating, compelling questions. There's a question right back here. We're going to wait till Candace. I also have a gift for Steve. So where's Steve? Yes, go ahead. Tell us who you are and who you're with.
Hi, my name is Gwen Tobert. I work with the Department of Homeland Security.
Okay.
And my office is filled with young leaders. Everybody thinks they're a leader. A lot of presidential management fellows.
Great.
And the problem is everyone traffics in ideas.
Okay.
We like to say that we're thought leaders, which is just jargon, but nothing ever moves forward past thought. There are so many ideas on the wall, and there are no implementers. Okay. How do we move past being the thinkers and actually get things done?
Just start. You go back to your office tomorrow, look at some of those Post-it notes ideas, you crystallize some of those into what we can do, and bring that idea back to your coworkers and say, enough chatter, let's execute. Because talk is cheap, we know that, right? I know it sounds as easy as just change can happen in a moment, right? If you choose to make that change, if it's important enough to you, and it sounds like it is. Remember, not everybody wants to be converted. You work with people who like to just talk about it. Don't waste your time trying to convert people who don't want to be converted. So you be that change enabler. You take some of those ideas. It's not about being perfect. It's about putting things in practice. Okay? That's what I would encourage you to do.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Question up here? There's a question back there? Name and who you're with?
Okay. Beverly Barham, and I'm with the Office of State Personnel for North Carolina. And my question is, when I got the invite to come here, it's all about up-and-coming young government leaders, which I think are great, because that's the environment I've mostly been in. It was my kids' friends, and then I went to grad school, so I'm around that age group. But you talk about baby boomers, I'm probably the oldest person in this room. But I never had a chance to get my career off the ground because I have become all of these things. I was held back until I got into grad school, and then I finally realized, you know, you really do have ideas that should be listened to.
Good.
But, you know, now everybody's looking for younger people coming in. What about those of us who are the ones who really should be going out the door, but we never had a chance to begin with? And I really feel more connected with this group because I feel like my career is just starting.
Good for you.
And I'm a grandmother, so, you know.
I think that's a great question. The one thing I would say is you all work with... Thank you. No, you all work with older people, right? You work with people in their 40s or 50s. And you think, boy, where's the exuberance? Where's the enthusiasm? They channel it differently. You know, if I were to be inside an organization today, I have as much energy as I did when I was 25. I just channel it differently. I'm more selective. I think what you want to, so again, when you see those people in your agency that you are like-minded than you, those are you should align yourself with. They're not going to be just like you, but you don't spend 20 years in any business, in any career, and not be a little more seasoned. That doesn't mean that they're not energized. It just means they channel it differently. So I think for you, you can be a resource to those younger people in your organization. You're probably going to have allies like that if they see that you are like-minded. That's what I try to do.
Actually, you know, those are who I identify
Good for you.
with the most. And I'm energized by them. I can help energize them.
Great.
I don't think it has to be a battle between
It's not
the
either or.
generations.
Right.
We have things to mentor each other on. We both have things to bring to the table.
Right.
And you see, I never got to bring anything to the
I
table. So therefore, I can identify with those who are coming in and want to do
We can
that.
talk about this after. I think we have one more question. I know people are getting restless. She's in the back there. And again, I'll be around the balance of today and all tomorrow.
Okay.
And is Steve in here? Okay, as soon as we wrap up, I have a gift for you. Well, you told me to bring it, so...
Again.
yes.
Hi, I'm Elisa D. from Alameda County, California.
Great. I do work at the city of Alameda.
Oh, great. Well, thank you for offering your assistance and advice to us. I was really interested in what you said about the importance of improving the hiring process because I want to work with the best and the brightest.
Yes.
What are some things we can do if we're not in an HR function to, help move in that direction?
If HR is not a helper, then, work around them. It wouldn't be the first time. I think every agency, including yours, you should have your own link on your own home web page, on your own website page, about testimonials and what a great place it is to work there. Pictures of people working. Talking about how again, this social marketing. Don't ask HR. If they're not helping, then work around them. Put stuff on your own site. Talk about what a great employer you are. People love to say they're employer of choice. Here's what you should ask them. What are you doing to show us that? It's a status thing. But we can talk offline, too, about just really tactical aspects that you can do that really, everything I talked to you about today has nothing to do with spending more money. Because money is not your most precious resource in an organization or your career. It's your time. Where are you spending your time on what to do what? So, well, I hope, before Steve come on up, I hope today gave you some just glimpse, and I hope I helped you challenge some assumptions. You think about your career, you think about where you're going, and that there's some nuggets here for you to go back and polish and help you get better all the time. But I want to wrap up to give Steve some swag here. He said he was going to send me some stuff a few months ago, but it must have got lost in the mail. We have these shirts, and it's Mejorando Group, right? And on the back, it's kind of a vanity statement, but hey, we're bold. It says, I'm getting better all the time. So this is for Steve.
All right, thank you, man.
All right.
We'll get you a shirt outside. You win a prize.
I think we're on break now. Is that right?
We got one right here.
Oh, okay. Anyway, thanks very much.